Parsha Lech Lecha. And the name said to Abram, Go forth from the land and your birthplace and your father's house to the land I will show you. And I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. And I will bless those who bless you, and those who damn you I will curse. And all the clans of the land through you shall be blessed. And Abram went forth as the name had spoken to him, and Lot went forth with him. Abram being 75 years old when he left Haran, and Abram took Sarai his wife, and Lot his nephew, and all the goods they had gotten, and the folks they had bought in Haran. And they set out on the way to the land of Canaan, and they came to the land of Canaan. And Abram crossed through the land to the site of Shechem, to the terebinth of Morah. The Canaanite was then in the land. And the name appeared to Abram and said, To your seed I will give this land. And he built an altar there to the name who had appeared to him. And he pulled up his stakes from there for the high country east of Bethel, and pitched his tent with Bethel to the west and Ai to the east. And he built there an altar to the name, and he invoked the name of the name. And Abram journeyed onward by stages to the Negeb. And there was a famine in the land, and Abram went down to Egypt to sojourn there, for the famine was grave in the land. And it happened as he drew near to the border of Egypt, that he said to Sarai his wife, Look, I know you are a beautiful woman. And so, when the Egyptians see you and say, She is his wife, they will kill me, while you they will let live. Say, please, that you are my sister, so that it will go well with me on your count, and I shall stay alive because of you. And it happened when Abram came into Egypt, that the Egyptians saw the woman was very beautiful. And Pharaoh's quarters saw her, and praised her to Pharaoh. And the woman was taken into Pharaoh's house. And it went well with Abram on her count. And he had sheep and cattle and donkey and male and female slaves and she-asses and camels. And the name afflicted Pharaoh and his household with terrible plagues because of Sarai, the wife of Abram. And Pharaoh summoned Abram and said, What is this you have done to me? Why did you not tell me she was your wife? Why did you say, She's my sister, so that I took her to me as wife? Now here is your wife. Take her and get out. And Pharaoh appointed men over him, and they sent him out with his wife and all he had. And Abram came up from Egypt, he and his wife and all he had, and Lot together with him to the Negeb. And Abram was heavily laden with cattle, with silver and gold. And he went on by stages from the Negeb up to Bethel, to the place where his tent had been before, between Bethel and Ai, to the place of the altar he had made the first time. And Abram invoked there the name of the name. And Lot too, who came along with Abram, had flocks and herds and tents. And the land could not support their dwelling together, for their substance was great, and they could not dwell together. And there was strife between the herdsmen of Abram's flock and the herdsmen of Lot's flock. The Canaanites and the Perizzites were then dwelling in the land. And Abram said to Lot, Pray, let there be no contention between you and me, between your herdsmen and mine, for we are kinsmen. Is not all the land before you? Pray, let us part company. If you take the left hand, then I shall go right. And if you take the right hand, I shall go left. And Lot raised his eyes and saw the whole plain of the Jordan, saw that all of it was well watered before the name's destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, like the garden of the name, like the land of Egypt, till you come to Zoar. And Lot chose for himself the whole plain of the Jordan, And Lot journeyed eastward, and they parted from one another. Abram dwelled in the land of Canaan, and Lot dwelled in the cities of the plain, and he set up his tent near Sodom. Now the people of Sodom were very evil offenders against the name, and the name had said to Abram after Lot parted from him, "Raise your eyes and look out from the place where you are to the north, and the south, and the east, and the west, for all the land you see, to you I will give it, and to your seed forever. And I will make your seed like the dust of the earth. Could a man count the dust of the earth, so too your seed might be counted. Rise, walk about the land through its length and its breadth, for to you I will give it." And Abram took up his tent and came to dwell by the terebinth of Mamre, which are in Hebron, and he built there an altar to the name. And it happened in the days of Amraphel, king of Shinar, Arioch, king of Elasar, Chedorlaomer, king of Elam, and Tidal, king of Goram. They made war on Bera, king of Sodom, and Bersha, king of Gomorrah, on Sinab, king of Admah, and Shmember, king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, that is Zoar. All of them joined forces in the valley of Siddim, that is the Dead Sea. 12 years they had been subject to Chedorlaomer, and in the 13th year they rebelled. And in the 14th year, Chedorlaomer and the kings who were with him came and struck down the Rephaim at Asheroth, Karnam, and the Zuzim at Ham, and the Emim at Sheva Kirathaim, and the Horites in the high country of Seir as far as El Paran, which is by the wilderness. And they swung back and came to En-Mishpat, that is Kadesh, and they struck all the territory of the Amalekite, and also the Amorite, who dwelled in Hazazon Tamar, and the king of Sodom, and the king of Gomorrah, and the king of Admah, and the king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, that is Zoar, went forth and joined battle with them in the valley of Siddim, with Chedorlaomer, king of Elam, and Tidal, king of Goyim, and Amraphel, king of Shinar, and Arioch, king of Elasar, 4 kings against the 5, and the valley of Siddim was riddled with bitumen pits, and the kings of Sodom fled there and leaped into them, while the rest fled to the high country. And the 4 kings took all the substance of Sodom and Gomorrah and all their food and went off. And they took Lot, Abram's nephew, and all his substance, and went off, for he was then dwelling in Sodom. And a fugitive came and told Abram the Hebrew, for he was then encamped at the terebinths of Mamre the Amorite, kinsman of Eshcol and Aner, who were Abraham's confederates. And Abram heard that his kinsman was taken captive, and he marshaled his retainers, natives of his household, 318 of them, and gave chase up to Dan. And he and his servants with him fanned out against them by night, and he struck them and pursued them up to Hobah, which is north of Damascus. And he brought back all the substance, and also Lot, his kinsman, and his substance he brought back, and the women, and the people as well. And the king of Sodom went forth to meet him after he came back from striking down Chedorlaomer and the kings that were with him, to the valley of Sheveh, that is, the valley of the king. And Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine, for he was priest to El Elyon. And he blessed him, and he said, "Blessed be Abram to El Elyon, possessor of heaven and earth, and blessed be El Elyon, who delivered your foes into your hands." And Abram gave him a tithe of everything. And the king of Sodom said to Abram, "Give me the folk, and the substance take for yourself." And Abram said to the king of Sodom, "I raise my hand in oath to the name, the El Elyon, possessor of heaven and earth, that I will take not a single thread or sandal strap of all that is yours, lest you say, I have made Abram rich. Nothing for me but what the lads have consumed. And as for the share of the men who came with me, Anir, Eshcol, and Mamre, let them take their share. After these things, the word of the name came to Abram in a vision, saying, Fear not, Abram, I am your shield. Your reward shall be very great. And Abram said, O my master, the name, what can you give me when I am going to my end childless, and the steward of my household is Demeshech Eliezer? And Abram said, Look, to me you have given no seed, and here a member of my household is to be mine heir. And now the word of the name came to him, saying, This one will not be your heir, but he who issues from your loins will be your heir. And he took him outside, and he said, Look up to the heavens and count the stars, if you can count them. And he said, So shall be your seed. And he trusted the name, and he reckoned it to his merit. And he said to him, I am the name who brought you out of Ur of the Chaldees, to give you this land to inherit. And he said, Oh, my master, the name, how shall I know that I shall inherit it? And he said to him, Take me a 3-year-old heifer, and a 3-year-old she-goat, and a 3-year-old ram, and a turtle dove, and a young pigeon. And he took all of these, and clove them through the middle, and each set his part opposite the other. But the birds he did not cleave, and carrion birds came down on the carcasses, and Abram drove them off. And as the sun was about to set, a deep slumber fell upon Abram, and now a great dark dread came falling upon him. And he said to Abram, Know well that your seed shall be strangers in a land not theirs, and they shall be enslaved and afflicted 400 years. But upon the nation for whom they slave I will bring judgment, and afterwards they shall come forth with great substance. As for you, you shall go to your fathers in peace. You shall be buried in a ripe old age, and in the 4th generation they shall return here, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet full. And just as the sun had set, there was a thick gloom, and look, a smoking brazier with a flaming torch that passed between those parts. On that day the name made a covenant with Abram, saying, To your seed I have given this land, from the river of Egypt to the great river, the river Euphrates, the Kenites and the Kenizzites and the Cadmonites and the Hittites and the Perizzites and the Rephaim and the Amorites and the Canaanites and the Girgashites and the Jebusites. Now Sarai, Abram's wife, had bore him no children, and she had an Egyptian slave girl named Hagar. And Sarai said to Abram, Look, pray, the name has kept me from bearing children. Pray, come to bed with my slave girl. Perhaps I shall be built up through her. And Abram heeded the voice of Sarai. And Sarai, Abram's wife, took Hagar, the Egyptian, her slave girl, after Abram had dwelled 10 years in the land of Canaan. And she gave her to Abram, her husband, as a wife. And he came to bed with Hagar, and she conceived, and she saw that she had conceived, and her mistress seemed slight in her eyes. And Sarai said to Abram, "This outrage against me is because of you. I myself put my slave girl in your embrace, and when she saw she had conceived, I became slight in her eyes. Let the name judge between you and me." And Abram said to Sarai, "Look, your slave girl is in your hands. Do to her whatever you think right." And Sarai harassed her, and she fled from her. And the name's messenger found her by a spring of water in the wilderness, by the spring on the way to Shur. And he said, "Hagar, slave girl of Sarai, where have you come from, and where are you going?" And she said, "From Sarai, my mistress, I am fleeing." And the name's messenger said to her, "Return to your mistress and suffer abuse at her hand." And the name's messenger said to her, "I will surely multiply your seed, and it will be beyond all counting." And the name's messenger said to her, "Look, you have conceived, and will bear a son, and you will call his name Ishmael, for the name has heeded your suffering. And he will be a wild ass of a man, his hand against all, the hand of all against him. He will encamp in despite of all his kin." And she called the name of the name who had addressed her, El Roi, for she said, "Did not I go on seeing here after he saw me?" Therefore is the well called Ber Lai Roi, which is between Kadesh and Bered. And Hagar bore a son to Abram, and Abram called his son who Hagar had borne Ishmael. And Abram was 86 years old when Hagar bore Ishmael to Abram. And Abram was 99 years old, and the name appeared to Abram and said to him, "I am El Shaddai. Walk in my presence and be blameless, and I will grant my covenant between me and you, and I will multiply you very greatly." And Abram flung himself on his face, and Elohim spoke to him, saying, "As for me, this is my covenant with you. You shall be father to a multitude of nations. And no longer shall your name be called Abram, but your name shall be called Abraham, for I have made you father to a multitude of nations. And I will make you most abundantly fruitful, and turn you into nations, and kings shall come forth from you. And I will establish my covenant between me and you, and your seed after you, through their generations, as an everlasting covenant, to be Elohim to you and to your seed after you. And I will give unto you and your seed after you the land in which you sojourned, the whole land of Canaan, as an everlasting holding, and I will be their Elohim." And Elohim said to Abraham, "As for you, you shall keep my commandment, you and your seed after you through their generations. This is my covenant which you shall keep between me and you and your seed after you. Every male among you must be circumcised. You shall circumcise the flesh of your foreskin, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and you. 8 days old, every male among you shall be circumcised through your generations, even slaves born in your household, and those purchased with silver from any foreigner who is not of your seed. Those born in your household and those purchased with silver must be circumcised, and my covenant in your flesh shall be an everlasting covenant, and a male with a foreskin who has not circumcised the flesh of his foreskin, that person shall be cut off from his folk. My covenant he has broken." And Elohim said to Abraham, "Sarai your wife shall no longer call her name Sarai, for Sarah is her name. And I will bless her, and I will also give you from her a son, and I will bless him, and she shall become nations. Kings of people shall issue from her." And Abraham flung himself on his face, and he laughed, saying to himself, To 100-year-old will a child be born? Will 90-year-old Sarah give birth? And Abraham said to Elohim, Would that Ishmael might live in your favor? And Elohim said, Yet Sarah your wife is to bear you a son, and you shall call his name Isaac. And I will establish my covenant with him as an everlasting covenant, for his seed after him. As for Ishmael, I have heard you. Look, I will bless him and make him fruitful and multiply him most abundantly. 12 chieftains he shall beget, and I will make him a great nation. But my covenant I will establish with Isaac, whom Sarah will bear you by this season next year. And he finished speaking with him, and God ascended from Abram. And Abram took Ishmael his son, and all the slaves born in his household, and those purchased with silver, every male among the people of Abram's household, and he circumcised the flesh of their foreskin on that very day, as God had spoken to him. And Abraham was 99 years old when the flesh of his foreskin was circumcised, and Ishmael his son was 13 years old when the flesh of his foreskin was circumcised. On that very day Abraham was circumcised, and Ishmael his son, and all the men of his household, those born in the household, and those purchased with silver from the foreigners, were circumcised with him.